Welcome to the Python video tutorial on basic data structures in Python. Now, this is going to be for the base Python. When we go forward, we're going to learn about NumPy and SciPy. They have different data structures. So if you're watching this and you're saying, but Ed, you're using the wrong data structures, you're right. So what I'm going to do here is show you some basic ones. That way we get going before we start getting into how to use libraries and needing to use libraries in order to look at these things. All right, so the first thing we want to do is just create a basic variable, okay? So I'm just going to type in here x1, and I'm going to make that equal to 5. So if I take this and I run this, I can use this button up here. This will run the current session or the current line. And then I can look at the variable explorer and I see x1 is an integer. It says it's size 1 and its value is 5. I can do this again if I want to. Y1 equals 10. And if I run this, I can see that I get y1 equals 10 up here. And notice it doesn't put anything down here. However, if I type in x1 down here, you'll see it retrieves 5 for me. And if I type y1 here, it retrieves 10 for me. So these are just basic integer type variables. Now, what if I make, let's say, x2 here, and I make it 5.0. Let's see if this does anything different. Notice I put in the decimal place. And notice it changes its type to a float. And while this may not seem important, sometimes it is important, because sometimes you want things to not have to convert between types. So if it's an integer, you don't want it to have to accidentally turn into a float, or it takes time to turn it into a float because it has to reassign memory. So if you can start that out correctly the first time, it makes life much easier. Okay, so let's play with another type of structure, which I'm going to call Z1, and it is a list. So here I'm going to put 5, and I have brackets, and I'm going to have 10. Now, if I run this line, you'll see that in my variable window here, I'm going to end up with a list of size 2, and these are the values. Now, I can retrieve values from this, Z1, and let's say I use the brackets and I put in here 1. Let's see what this does. And I run it, and I see it's 10. But wait, the first value is 5. And this is something that you're going to have to get used to with Python, is that the indexing starts at 0. So if you're a C programmer, this is completely natural and you don't think it's odd at all. If you program in something like R or some other languages, even MATLAB, indexing starts at 1. So if I run this with 0, you'll see that it actually pulls the first number out of my array or my list. So just keep that in mind when you're doing this. So let's do some commenting here real quick, because commenting is important. So we'll do integer variables. And then here we're going to do float variables, if I can get my fingers to work right. So float variables. And down here we're going to do, this is an array or a list. And this is how to retrieve a list. And I'm going to put in here, indexing starts at 0, and put exclamation marks so that I can remember this. And then I can make lists of lists, which is a popular thing to do if you're trying to do these things directly. And so here I could make a list of a list. So I'm going to do 5 and 10 here like I've seen before. And then I'm going to put a comma, and then I'm going to do, how about 15 and 20? Okay, so this is my new object here that I'm creating, and it is a list of lists. And if I run this, you'll see that it shows up in the variable explorer over here. But now I have to pay attention, because I need to be aware of how to pull information out of this. So let's put in a comment here. Put lists, list of lists. Okay. And if I want to, this is a rudimentary way of making a matrix or an array type object. So if I do Z2 and I use 0, because that is the first item, let's see what this produces for us. And if you notice, it gives me 5 and 10. It gives me the first list back. So if I want to get the first item out of that list, that first list, I'm going to have to use another set of brackets. So here I use the other set of brackets, and notice now I can pull the number 5 out of there. Similarly, I can do Z2, and then I'm going to put 1 and 1. Let's see what this does. If I do that, I got to highlight it, and this pulls out 20, which is my element in position 1, 1, given that we started at 0. Okay, so let's try one thing that you might be tempted to do, 1, 1. Let's see what this does. Why are we tempted to do it? Because it works in other languages. And notice we get an error over here. Indices must be integers or slices, not tuples. Okay, so this doesn't work at all. So we really need to pay attention to what we're working on. Okay, so now that we know that doesn't work, just put down in here a comment. We need to use 2 indices to pull values. Okay, and we should probably put a little comment here because we didn't do this before. Z2 is 0. And this will give you some sense of how to start working with these basic data types or data structures in Python. Now, with this said, we are going to change data structures, and we're going to go to ones that are from the NumPy library and the SciPy library, which are actual arrays, and they behave much differently. They're easier to use, but often when you're learning how to do things, you need to learn how to do it from the basic perspective, because other people are going to write code and they may not be using those libraries, which can cause problems if you're not careful. So what we want to do is make sure that we're doing the right thing as we go along here. Okay, so this is probably enough for this video, and we'll move on to the next one.